Okay, so up to Daf Nun Ches 58. Where the Gemara is going to continue all these discussions and then eventually finish discussions about the stories during the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, the Chorban Bayis Sheni. Okay, so it says the Gemara. Amar Ravasi, Ravasi says, Arba Kabin Moyach Nimtu al Even Achas. In regards to the destruction of Beitar, 4 kav, which is a weight, actually it's a volume measurement, 4 kav of brain matter, brains, were found on 1 stone. Amar Ola Tisha Kav, Ola says 9. Rav Kahana v'Yitim Rav Shila B'Amori Ma'ikro, what's the pasuk? Bas Bavel Asheduda Ashrei She'Shalom Lach Ashrei She'Yirches the Nipit Etz Es Oilolayach Ala Salah. When David was prophesying, when David HaMelech was prophesying about the future Churban Bayis Sheni, he says, happy is he who has seized and dashed the little ones against the rock, i.e. the children who were killed by being beaten on a rock in the time of the Churban. Okay. What does it mean, Mesiloim Bapaz? So if it is meaning that they were covered in fine gold, doesn't make sense, because if Sheila says 2 istra weights of fine gold, like the best gold in the world, only 2 istras of it exist. One of them is in Rome and one is scattered out by the rest of the world. As opposed to Biyafyam. Rather, it means that these children were so beautiful. Actually, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're children, but these Jews who were destroyed or killed were so beautiful that they were covered in. They made fine gold look negligible. Initially, the noblemen of Rome would keep an image imprinted on the seal by their beds when they would have relations. In the olden days, it was commonly thought that if you thought about or saw something beautiful while you had relations, then the child would be beautiful. So originally, they would have like an imprinted seal up by their beds, but then they would bring Jewish children and tie them to the foot of their bed and then have relations. Because again, it has to be, actually his children, has to do with the beauty of the children of the Jews. It won't happen that one child went to his friend, or said to his friend, that this affliction that they were going through in the hands of the brutal Romans. Where does it say this? It says this affliction, and the Torah says when it has to do with the prophecy of all the punishments that's going to come to us, even the illnesses that it's not written here. How far am I from this? Basically, I'm not up to that pasuk, that verse yet. How far am I? Isnag Pusko Palga. You're about 1.5 columns away from it, and you would have reached it if you would have learned that. He says, by the way, if I would have reached that, if I would have learned it before the exile, before in Yerushalayim, or wherever they came from, in Israel, I wouldn't have needed you. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, the name of Shimon ben Gamliel. So what does it mean in the pasuk? It says, my eyes affect my soul because of all of the daughters of my city. There are 400 synagogues, shuls in the city of Beitar. And in each one there was 400 malamde tinoikas, people that would teach children. And each and every one of these teachers had 400 school children. And again, these numbers, according to Maharal and Mashar, are exaggerated, but the point is that the size of the Jewish community in Beitar was just enormous. When the enemy entered into these study halls, they would stab their enemies with their pens. When the enemies conquered them, and eventually when the enemy conquered Beitar, they tied the Jews in these children in their own Sfarim, their books, the scrolls, which is then written on parchment, and lit them on fire. Tragic. There was a story with Rabbi Shimon Echanani. He went to a big town in Rome, city in Rome. They told him, there's one kid in the prison. He's good looking, he has nice eyes, and he has nice hair. So he went to the entrance to the prison. So he went outside the prison and he said, who gave Yaakov to spoil and Jews, Israel, to the robbers? And he heard the child from inside the prison say, he continued the pasuk talking about the reason why this has happened is because the Jews had left the Torah. Amar Rabbi Yeshua said, I am certain that he will issue halachic ruling. He's going to be a big teacher in the Jewish nation. I swear, I'm not going to leave. I'm going to redeem him for however much they say is the cost of his ransom. He didn't leave until he was redeemed for a lot of money. And sure enough, it wasn't even just a few days, a short amount of time, until he became a big, famous sage in Manu. And who was he? Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha was unbelievably great. We learn about how he came so close to Hashem, etc. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav. This is one of the most harrowing stories that we read about. One of the most, if not the most. We read about this in the Kinnos of Tisha B'Av. This Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, his son and daughter, were both captured, the Shnei Adonim, to be slaves to two different masters. One time, these two owners, they met each other. This one says, I have a servant. There's no one more beautiful than him. This one says, I have a maidservant. There's nobody, no woman as beautiful as her. They said, let's get them married to each other. And we'll share the children, these slaves who are going to be super, super handsome and good looking. They're going to be the most valuable slaves. So they put them at night into a dark room. Each one sat in the farthest corner from each other. They didn't know that they were siblings. This one said to that, he said to himself, Ani Kohen ben Kohenim Gedolim, Esa Shivcha. I am a priest, a Kohen, and I am the son of Kohenim, high priests. Esa Shivcha, I'm going to marry a maidservant. And she in the other corner said, Ani Kohenes bas Kohenim Gedolim, and Asa Le'eved. I am a Kohenes, also from a family of priests. I'm going to marry a servant. They cried the whole night. When the morning came about, they realized, they recognized each other with the crack of dawn. And they fell upon each other. And they burst into tears until they both died. And about these two siblings, the brother and the sister, the children of Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, Yirmiyah cried, these are the ones I cry for. My eyes, they weep with water. An unbelievably harrowing story. Shlaki says, there's another story with a certain woman, with Tzofnas bas Peniel Shema. Her name was Tzofnas bas Peniel. Tzofnas shakol tzoifim biyafya. The reason why she was called Tzofnas is because everybody looked at her beauty. Bas Peniel, she was called the daughter of Peniel because she was a daughter of the high priest. Shashimesh lifnai v'lifnim. Peniel could be inside the Beis Hamikdash. Shenis'alo ba shaboy kol halayla. She was taken captive, and her captive abused her the whole night. Lemacha hilbisha shiva chalukim. The next day, he dressed her in 7 garments and took her out to sell her to the next owner. He basically covered her up a lot, and then he took her out to sell her. And a man that was very ugly came and said, Harenius Yofia, show me her beauty. Amar Loi, he said to this ugly man, Reika, you empty nothing person. If you want to take her, buy her. But I guarantee you, there's nobody as beautiful as her in the whole world. Amar Loi, Afa became, he said, even so, I want to see for myself what I'm buying. If Shita Shisha Chalukim, so he took off the 6 outermost garments. Ushavi Garasav and Albashtav the and the 7th one she tore herself and she rolled herself into the ashes. Amr Lefanam, she cried out to Hashem. She said, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, Im Aleinu Lechasta Kedusha Shimcha Gibor Lotachos. If you don't have any mercy on us as a nation, that we'll be disgraced like this. But why don't you have pity for the sanctity of your name, of Hashem? Va'aleha Koinen Yirmiyah lamented about her. Bas Ami Chigri Sak Ve'Opashi Ba'eva Eva Yachid Asilach Mispat Tamrum Ki Pisam Yaveh Hashaydid Aleinu. Pasuk talks about the daughters of our people girding themselves with sackcloth, rolling in ashes, referring to her. Hashem, so to speak, shares the pain, which Hashem's name is also disgraced when the Jewish nation is disgraced. Abida says the name of Rav. What is the meaning of the pasuk when it says they oppress a man in his house and even a man in his heritage? There's the story of the person. He put his eyes on the wife of his teacher, of his wife, his master. But Shuli the Nagri Hava, and he was a carpenter's apprentice. He was a very low-level person, but he had his eye on his master's wife. His teacher needed to borrow money. So he said, send your wife to me and I'll lend you the cash that you need. So he sent his wife, and his wife stayed with this younger, wherever this apprentice was, for 3 days. So the owner came. Where's my wife? Where's she? I let her go straight away. I don't know what you're talking about. I let her go. But I heard that some youth had abused her on the way. So the man said to his apprentice, what should I do? If you listen to my advice, divorce her. So he said, wait, her kusuba, her marriage dowry, cost a lot of money. So he said to him, Ani al veka the The apprentice said, I'll lend you the money. You pay her marriage dowry and divorce her. And this guy, trusting his apprentice that nothing was up, he listened and he divorced his wife, and then an apprentice went and married him. Married his boss's wife. Since the time came and the debt was due, the apprentice said to him, now again, remember, he owed the apprentice money for the marriage contract to his wife, who his apprentice had stolen from him, basically. Now, the apprentice held him to this debt, and he said, you know what, you work for me, and you can pay off the debt. Him and the wife that he stole from the boss, the apprentice, were sitting and eating and drinking. And this master, whose demise was plotted by his servant who became the master, he was the one serving the drinks. He was the butler. And his eyes he was crying, and his tears fell inside the cups of drinks that he was serving to them. And about that time, that was when the Jewish people's sentence was sealed about the destruction, the Churban by Sheni. But Amrulan, some say al shtei psilos v'nei echad, and some people say no. The reason why it was destroyed was because of 2 wicks in one lamp, which is a euphemism, which was already for the sin that happened beforehand, which was the fact that she was unfaithful to him. But either way, this episode had to do with the destruction of what was sealed the deal for the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, second temple. So either way, that's the end of the topics that discuss the Tisha B'Av stories. But we'll carry on anyway with the daf until we get to the end of the page. So the Gemara turns back to the Mishnah, which talks about buying from the bandits or the robbers, whoever these people are, these violent people that take people's property. Only if you told them, go and take it. But in every case, if you write a document, even if you're buying it from the person who took a vow and he still acquires it. Until he writes him a guarantee that even if he gets repossessed, then that's not considered done. Tanika would say the Shmuel, we have a brayso that says like Shmuel Reb Shimon ben Elazar Reb Shimon ben Elazar is of the opinion that if he buys the value of the ksuba from the wife and then from the husband, the sale is valid. From the husband and then from the wife, the sale is not valid until he writes him a guarantee. Name it to have a tshuva to the Rab. Let's say it's a refutation of Rab, because the brayso says not like him. Achrayas doesn't mean a guarantee. Instead, in this case, it means a document, kind of thing. He took it from the purchased land from these Baalim people, bandit, whatever you call them, and then he used the land for 3 years in front of the previous owners, and then he sold it. Now the question is, can the previous owners hold the second purchaser liable? So we say no, he can't, because for 3 years he should have objected sometime between that 3 years. Says the Gemara, if the owner was, if the second buyer is saying, I bought it from you directly, paying you properly, paying even the first buyer should be deemed credible if he says he bought it properly. And if he's not saying that he bought it properly, then regardless he should have to give it back. So what would be the case when it makes that difference, that 3 years? Amr Sheshes of Sheshes says, it could be a case when he's not claiming it, but we can teach him to claim it. So if he makes the claim that he bought it properly, then he would be allowed to keep it. And according to the other party, if he claims it, then yes. If he doesn't claim it, no, we don't want to extract property from people without proper proof. Okay, a new piece of Gemara. Somebody who wants to seize possession of a property because of a debt, or because they claim that. So if property comes into one's possession due to payment of a debt, or the opposite, you get property because it was used as payment debt, or due to unjust seizure and parrot by a non-Jew. Aim by Mishum Sikrika. So the laws of Sikrika don't apply. Van Paris adds one. What about this land which was seized itself? It has to stay in the possession of the non-Jew for at least 12 months before any buyers are allowed to take it. But hang on, that sounds very similar to the law of Sikrikan. He said it doesn't have the law of Sikrikan. What we meant to say is that the Sikrikan himself, that person who grabbed it, he has to keep it for 12 months. The halacha is this law about unjust seizure doesn't exist in Babel, because the Babylonians won't seize, presumably because the Babylonians won't seize land unjustly. But we do see that sometimes there is unjust seizures of land. So why doesn't it apply? Not doesn't mean that there are never any unjust seizures, just means that the law doesn't apply. Why? Because there is a government and there's a law and order, and he can go and complain. So he could have gone to complain, but so because he didn't go to complain, he must be waiving his rights. Gidel bar Re'ilai Kabal Arab Taskami Bay Baga. Gidel bar Re'ilai, he will receive lands from the residents in exchange for like land tax. Basically, they would all together join to pay this tax. Active the class Shannon. So Gidel gave the money for 3 years in advance, although the tax is ordinarily paid annually. Gidel, he paid for 3 years in advance. After the first year, the previous owner says, for the first year you paid the tax, you already used it. Give us the rest of the money. But he had already paid for it. He paid for 3 years in advance. Also, he came in front of our papa. He didn't know what to do. Sad the case. So they wanted to write a document to repossess the property against the residents of the Valley of Baga, because he had a right to the land for 2 more years because he paid in advance. If you're taking land forcefully or allowing land to be taken forcefully, then you are using the laws of Sikrikan, and they were in Babylonia, where it didn't apply. This is a classic Gemara saying that when you are irresponsible with your money, it's considered you're putting your money on the horn of a deer. It's going to be gone, and you're never going to be able to get it back. So he was irresponsible, therefore he lost the money, and they didn't allow him to repossess. Zu Mishnah Rishonah says the Mishnah, this was what they thought in the beginning, about the laws of Sikrikan. But then, based in Shacharim, Amru Halakech Sikrikan is Nabalim Ravia. They made a rule that anyone that buys from anyone that took it unjustly has to give a quarter to the owner. Amarav Ravia Bekarka Ravia B'Mos. What does it mean? You have to actually give him a quarter of the property or a quarter of the value that you bought it for. So actually, Rav says no. It could be either or. You choose. Shmuel Amar Ravia Bekarka Shehim Shlish B'Mos. Shmuel says you have to give a quarter of the land, which ends up being a third of the money that you pay, because you always pay less than the real value of the property. What are they arguing about? Masava Nechi Ravia Zavin. One of them is of the opinion that when a person buys it, they're buying such property for a fourth less, quarter less. Masava Nechi Chumshu Zavin. Another one holds, in such a case, the Sikrikas will normally sell the fields for a fifth less. So the question is, what do you take it a quarter or do you take a fifth? Do you pay a quarter or a fifth? Meisvei, we have a contradiction from another brayso. This brayso clearly states that the one who chooses whether to take a fourth of the field's value or a fourth of the money that they paid for it, that's the choice of the previous owner, who will probably choose a quarter of the money, which is a quarter of the. Well, actually, they can choose either, depending on which one's more valuable. So it says, and the brayso continues. Whenever the owner, the previous owner who had it forcibly taken away from them, can buy it, we always have to let them buy it, give them first dibs. Rabbi Hoshev Basin, Rabbi established a basin, Venimnu, and they counted their votes. Basically, they voted. Rabbi ruled that you give to the owner either a quarter in the land or a quarter in the money. This follows the opinion of Rav, which is a question on Shmuel. Amar Rashi says, this is referring to once the owner already got money. So it's not referring to the quarter of the money that the buyer paid the bandit. Rather, it's talking about a quarter of the field's actual value, which happens to be a third of what the buyer paid. So basically, Rav can also twist that piece of Gemara. And then tomorrow we'll start from Amar Rav and turn over to the top of the page, where Rav continues to talk about being present. What does he say? He was in this count with Rebbe when they established this ruling. But either way. Yeah, so that's the end of the daf. Daf Nun Ches, and tomorrow we'll do daf Nun Tes. But yeah, that's the end. We finished already previously the Gemara about the Tisha B'Av story.